Hey, welcome to a foreigner in the Philippines. A little late night browsing of the internet. Wonderful thing, the internet. You know, you think about the education that you can get. For me, I left school when I was 15, a little secondary, St. Wilfrid's Secondary Modern School in Hume, in Manchester, a big industrial city in the north of England. So, what did I get? Well, not much. They kind of gave me the bum's rush out the door when I was 15 and a half. I did what I could. 15 and a half, I went in, I got a job first of all in a clothing factory, and that wasn't really working out very well, and I became a trainee coal miner in the Robin Hood pit in the north of London, in the north of England, sorry. I'm trying to find something here which is pretty important, because what we've got apparently in the States we've got new leaders coming up. That's the apparency, at least. So what are these new leaders going to do? Well, one, they're calling Sleepy Creepy and his name nowadays because of the censorship that's going on in all of the big conglomerates. All of the big companies are getting together, and they're going to tell us what we can and can't say. Now, one of the people that would be in charge, a lady named Kamala. And what's her background? Well, her background apparently is strongly founded in Marxism. Her parents were very much into that. Communism. They're calling it socialism now, okay? They're calling it socialism, which has a softer ring as far as Americans go. And make no mistake, America is key to peace in the world and freedom in the world. America has always been the place where people strive to get to. Because of that, ironically, French-made Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty is another whole story itself. It was designed and built and given as a gift, and it lay in a yard for many years before it was erected, and then they put it up, and of course now it's become a symbol of America and the freedom that people enjoy there. It is getting to the point where it is no more, because now even the top man, and now of course on Facebook we're not allowed to say certain words, certain names, and if we were to go to a job, if we were to try to get a job in America, in any one of a huge number, seems to me to be a big number of companies which could possibly promise a lucrative and bright future, if we were to mention that name, we wouldn't be able to get the job. We would be discriminated against, which was what America was all about. Anti-discrimination. Where, let me just see, I wanted to show you what Marxism is about. There was a Marxist Agenda, which I must find someday. I have to look back, way back, on a post that I did of a lady that's a housewife, became very strong in trying to save her country, the American way of life. And there is, make no mistake, there is no other country in the world that is like America. I've said this before. You cannot go to any other country, no other country in the world, where you can go, I'm sorry, I'm looking down here because I'm trying to keep this alive on my phone so I can read it to you. You can't go anywhere, take citizenship and call yourself an American, and the guy next to you who doesn't speak any better English than you will say, yeah, I'm an American too. And everybody will accept it. You can't go to China, take citizenship there. In fact, I don't think you can go and take citizenship, but you couldn't go there, you couldn't go to, I don't know, you couldn't go to Mexico, you couldn't go to Africa, couldn't go anywhere at all and call yourself the name of that country. It's only America. It's special in that way. Now, what's the Marxist agenda? Do you know the Marxist agenda? I didn't know until this lady read out all of the points. Now, I haven't found that, but I have found what the Marxist goal is. So let me read this to you. Sorry if you're looking at the top of my head for most of this. Anyway, the Marxist goal. The Marxist goal is to replace American values with global values. What are they? Now listen to this. This is really interesting. What are they? What are those global values? Open borders, redistribution, distribution, redistribution. Sorry, I'm looking at the black screen with white lettering, and my old eyes won't do it. Redistribution of wealth, population control. Is this all sounding familiar? Elimination of private property rights, individualism, and radical environmentalism that elevates nature over man. In order for these values to be successfully inculcated into the world view of Americans, this is the goal. The obstacles of, listen to this, the obstacles of strong families, communities and institutions led by patriotic American men of courage and conviction must be destroyed. Listen to what is being said. This was all written years and years ago. I believe, if my memory serves me right, which is it's in there in the cotton wool somewhere, it was in the 60s. This was all written up in the 60s. Khrushchev, who was one of the leaders, for those of you who are too young to know, was one of the leaders of the Soviet Union, and he was the one that banged his shoe on. He took his shoe off to get the attention of the assembly, and he banged his shoe on the desk. One of the things that he said was, we don't need to invade. We don't need to invade America. We will conquer America with our agenda. This is the agenda that he was talking about. The obstacles of strong families, communities, institutions led by patriotic American men of courage and convictions must be destroyed. So what are we seeing? It's toxic. What we are seeing is toxic masculinity, white privilege and racism. This is all the kind of stuff that we get rammed down our throat as entertainment, where they're showing rape, and then after the rape, because we are manipulated and outraged by what has happened to the poor woman that we have actually watched being abused, and now we're going to hunt that guy down, and we're going to be as brutal to him, if not more brutal, than he was to her. It's taught brutalism. Toxic masculinity, white privilege and racism. These are the tools being used to shame patriotic Americans into surrendering their values and convictions in order to avoid being marginalized, characterized and vilified. Now, because Americans did not fully fight the Marxist infiltration into our own nation, but rather allowed Marxist intellectuals to teach in our education system, we have literally taught our own children anti-American and anti-Christ values and have strengthened our foes. Thus we have a Marxist revolution materializing before our eyes. Now if you look at some of the things that I said in there, we're educating. We have put into I'm talking as if the world is American, but it's so heavily influenced by the American nation, the American situation, that it's important to think that way just for a moment. The colleges we've allowed the colleges to have these Marxist-oriented professors teaching this stuff. That's why all of this is happening in the education system. In the education system, it's all being changed now to prepare us for all of the things that were mentioned in here. Did you notice that part of the Marxist agenda is elimination of property rights? Now, who said this very recently? Old Miss Kamala said it, as if it was a good thing, and for her it probably would be, except it wouldn't apply to her. So, we won't own anything. You won't own anything, she said, in velvet tones, as if it was going to be a wonderful thing because we won't have to pay property tax, because we'll just receive a wage and everything will be so good. We won't own a damn thing. That whole idea of the American dream, of owning a nice piece of property, a house, a car, a family. Families? No, we don't want families. We don't want strong families in which people are unified. We don't want communities. This is why. What have we lost at the moment? We've are in the process of losing free speech. All of those platforms that we thought were free speech, now that they've gradually, those are being honed down. They're being reduced, until eventually we will not be able to talk about him, and certainly we won't be able to talk about her, and we won't be able to agree with that guy up there, because we're not going to have churches, because that's the last thing that we want, of people getting together and talking, sharing like-minded ideas, working for each other. This is not part of the agenda. It's not. When you have someone who has a strong family tie, who has his own property which he takes a pride in, a good job, if he earns enough money to be able to live the life in the lifestyle that he wants, then this is not a good thing if you are thinking about controlling people. That's why many people have said in those nations which they call third world countries, they always say, well, yes, if you've got that kind of religion where there are no reduction, well, there's no restriction on having children. It's not taught to keep your family to a point that you can afford, and all of this kind of thing. Then it's easier to control people, and it's about control. What's the other thing that it states? We're talking about back to the 60s. It's back to the 60s where they were talking about population control. Now, you have to go back a lot further to find eugenics. Now, in case, what's the layman's term for eugenics? What's the layman's description? Is what was sought in the 1930s. In the 1930s, lead up to the war, and I know at the moment it's very popular to liken people to Nazis, to liken people to, and the Germans get it in the neck every time, because they had Hitler. Well, Hitler's idea was eugenics. He was way into eugenics. He had farms where women who were chosen for their Aryan look, blonde, blue eyes, fair skin, white, and the Marxist thing always gets into using racism, white supremacy, all of these things which over the years we tried to eliminate, and it also gets into well, for Hitler it got into breeding people, choosing people not because they were in love and had a family and were united, but because they had a certain look that Mr. Adolf had decided was the way to go, and they were brought together. They would have a child or children, and those children are actually, some of those children in real life are actually alive today, came from those situations. Whether they know it or not is another thing, but certainly probably most of those women that were involved in that experiment or that program are probably not still alive, so we don't have first information or first accounts of that. But certainly that was a known program. Eugenics. Now, eugenics. Who's interested in eugenics? Uncle Billy. Uncle Billy is right there. He is interested in depopulation, population control, and he's interested in eugenics. So, what have we lost right now that is in line with the Marxist way of thinking? They are controlling, to an extent, we've lost control of education. We've lost control of that. Gatherings are being held down because of the what is perceived and promoted as being the virus. So, see, I'm not even allowed to say that, otherwise I get blocked. So, all of that is all happening right now. We're not supposed to go to church. We're not supposed to touch. I'm not supposed to hug a friend. I've seen people not in my situation, because we live way out in the boondocks. We're out in the province, you know. I can't actually see a house from where I live. We live in hundreds of square miles of mountainous, you would call it hills, but they're mountains. We live high in the mountains, and we seldom see anybody in the 2 miles down to the main road. We'll see the occasional neighbour. We'll see somebody who is taking care of his carabao. See a young man on a motorcycle. Maybe one other car or truck. So we don't see anybody. So we're not held. We're not stressed. We're not imprisoned by the same regulations and differences. And anyway, out here in Bohol, things are so much more laid back anyway. But there are people who can't go to visit their families. And this is happening. So we've lost now, very recently, what's coming to the fore is we've lost freedom of speech. We're not allowed, but not just freedom of speech, but not allowed to share our beliefs. That's the thing. And the only thing that is stopping this from taking flight and, boy, just taking off like a rocket, is the fact that the internet has become its own monster. So the people who think that they have the internet under control, the logistics are just so incredible. You may have read that because of the censorship, millions upon millions have transferred like that to another public a public platform. So it's going to be difficult to control this. And if you think about the way that during the Second World War, which I draw on because I was born at the outset of the Second World War, 1939. And I was brought up with this whole thing of the underground movement. There's already an underground movement. Let them try to stop this. But we will go through a trying time. Believe me, it's going to be rough. Boy, I don't have to be a genius to say that, do I? And you're all saying, oh, tell us something we didn't know. You've got to stay safe. You've got to be careful. What you say is what they want you to feel. Eventually, you know, one of the images that I remember the most, two actually, was of the young man who stood out in Tiananmen Square and faced a tank. Just a young lad. Don't know what happened to him. I'm sure it wasn't pretty. The other thing, when the Philippines was finally in revolt against the martial law of Marcos, Marcos sent his troops out on the street, and the women went on the street and they said to the soldiers, "You cannot shoot us. I know your mother." You see, it was family against family, and in the end it didn't work. Who knows what's going to happen? We're in for an excitingly, perhaps terrifyingly exciting time in the next, certainly in the next week to 10 days, and it's not going to be over then. No matter what happens, the rest who didn't agree will still not agree. And I actually heard today, I'll have to read this lady's name because I don't actually remember it, but Rep Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a new Republican senator, representative, and she is going to file impeachment against the new president. Doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that what happened 4 years ago? And now, as someone said, be careful what you wish for. They were talking about the Amendment 25 and just get rid of him. There's a lot of reason why they're doing that, right? If, and I think it's a very big if it were successful, then a departing leader, shall we say, rather than the dreaded word with president, would not be able to have all of the same honour as someone who had not been impeached. He would not have protection, even though there have been death threats. The list would go on. He wouldn't be able to have his library. Even other presidents who have not been so honourable have been able to have their library, which is a salute to the achievements that they did. And boy, this man, whatever you think of him, he did have a lot of achievements. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.